Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is Michael Antonacci. Mike is a friend of mine, has been for a few years now, and we met when he was kind of checking out of boot camp to maybe become a facilitator. I don't even know how many years ago. How long ago was that, Mike?
I think that was probably 4 years at this point.
Okay. All right. And we became friends. We're not besties. We don't get to have coffee every day. Of course, I live in Arkansas, and Mike, you lived in Denver for a while now, haven't you?
Yeah, I think also 4 years. It was about that time I moved out here for this role specifically to teach and coach people in their support raising.
Nice. And of course, you work with Focus, and I know I've had you on as a guest before, but you are recently married, right? Has it been a full year yet?
It's been a little over a full year. Yep.
Woo, congratulations. So tell us a little bit about your wife before we jump into our topic today.
Yeah, so she is a home health nurse, which means she cares for people who are homebound, a lot of veterans and elderly and disabled there. And so people would always joke, because I have a number of health issues, like that's how we met. It is not. We did not meet at the hospital. She was never my nurse. We met through a roommate of hers who also worked for Focus with me and set us up on our first date.
Nice. Well, Mike, to set up this, I guess this is going to be a series. We're not intending to necessarily put these back to back, but you and I have had an ongoing conversation for a while now, but it's picked up speed in the last year or so about this whole idea of illness and support raising. And anybody that's been listening to the podcast for a while has probably picked up that my wife's health is not good, and we're quite thankful that she's alive. In fact, just even in the last week, she's been in and out of the hospital twice in the last week and a half. And so I'm more than willing to share more about her details, but I don't really need to get into that at this moment. But Mike, you also certainly personally struggle with some very serious health issues. So I'm just going to invite you to kind of set the stage a little bit about where we're headed in our discussion today.
Yeah, so I have a lot of diagnoses, as some people with illnesses joke, where I'm just collecting acronyms. So I'm not going to use any acronyms on this. I have a genetic connective tissue disorder, which means my connective tissue is weaker, more flexible, so my joints are very bendy, and an autoimmune nerve condition, which I had a genetics appointment last week, which is like a 3-year wait to get into that. The autoimmunity is the primary one.
Okay.
So that's good to know. Functionally, so last year I could stand for 5 minutes per hour and sit for 10 to 15, and then I would need to lay down an hour to recharge that, basically. I could do more, but then I'd have to rest more, or I would just hurt the rest of the day. Arms also hurt, so I couldn't do my stuff via voice on my computer. Everything's improving very, very, very slowly. So I can do more per hour for each of those things, but very slow increase. So right now I'm actually horizontal. I'm at my laying desk. I think pretty much anyone in Focus, they've probably seen me do a video call while at my laying desk. I had a coworker say, "Wow, we should all work like this." That said, it took a while to figure out this setup and what adaptations I need to make.
Right.
And even I'd been doing support raising for 5 years before the onset of pain. And so had to adapt a lot of the systems I had in place. So more of how do I maintain a support team? How do I continue to find new partners to minister to existing partners? And then, of course, how do I work? How do I do my job of coaching and teaching? I've taught classes from a couch before.
Right.
So
for our listeners real quick, Mike, let me just jump in and just clarify, because sometimes people are coming to the podcast and they're a little new to the process and the understanding. Mike trains and coaches people who are raising their support. And so that's why he's constantly in the support raising world, so to speak. He's not, Mike, you're not a multi-billionaire at this point because you've been support raising nonstop for your entire life, right?
That is correct. I am not.
Okay. Okay. So Mike is fully funded and has been for a number of years. Now, every now and then, and I'm this way as well, there are times when I do need to raise a little more support. Perhaps it's for an upcoming project, or you might get a raise, or your health care goes up, but your organization approves you, Mike, and you might need to go raise another $200 a month or $500 for a project or something like that. Is that pretty accurate?
That's accurate. And also there's at one time I was getting married soon. And so
Mm.
that's a whole new realm of support requirements. So yeah, all of what you've said is
Okay.
accurate.
Okay, great, great. All right, carry on, please, with kind of setting the stage.
Yeah. So, and I think a thing that was really helpful. So when the first year that I taught support raising classes, this is the year after I got trained with Aaron. I was wearing my arm braces at summer training because this is like the first time my arms are hurting. And it was just so interesting how many people noticed it and said, "Hey, I also have arm pain." And you
Mm,
would have no idea because most illnesses are invisible, pain especially. You can't see it. You can see a broken leg, but you can't see if someone has a lung condition, for example.
right.
And so I, at the time, felt like I was alone, like that I was the only one who had this. And seeing people come up and say, "Oh yeah, I can't use the trackpad on my computer. I have to use a mouse because the trackpad hurts too much." I'm like, "No way, me too." And
Mm,
having the conversations, we were able to connect on a deeper level much faster because I knew they understood. And
right.
also, the lie I was believing was, "There's no way I can do this. I can't be a good missionary. I can't be a good future husband or father with arm pain." But all of these people are doing all of those things, which is a great way to counteract lies with
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah,
that. So by being able to bring these conversations into the open, especially in the ministry and support raising world, you need to know that you're not alone in
yeah.
this. And
Unfortunately, though,
yeah.
more often I would guess your experience, and you tell me if I'm wrong, because I know this has been our experience with my wife, Marky. People are less likely to go, hey, I had that issue too. They're more likely to go, well, you don't look sick.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And
I think
that's kind of a bitter backhanded compliment.
yeah, so one of the people in the chronic illness group in Denver that I'm part of, she has a handicap placard and had someone yelling at her for using it, accusing her of stealing her grandma's. You can't just buy a handicap placard. You have to have it prescribed by a doctor.
Yeah, yeah,
And because she looked fine, but you would have no idea all the stuff that's going on. So yeah, the "you don't look sick." I just remember thinking like, how many doctors like that's their exam is they look at you? Like, no, they at
yeah.
least talk to you, touch you, take pictures of you with medical imaging. Like, there's a lot of stuff. But
Yes, there
yeah,
is.
it can be a frustrating thing with an invisible condition for sure.
And there are people that just aren't gracious, like in a lot of ways. But I can think back. There was a time a few months ago where we pulled into a disabled parking spot, and my wife was actually having a great day. Praise the Lord, she was doing really good. But if she would have walked a long distance, that would have changed for her very quickly. And so, we sometimes we really try and shorten her distances up so that she doesn't crash and burn, is what we call it.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, yeah, we pulled into a spot, and she got out of the car, and this car pulled up behind us and honked rudely and yelled something at her. And I have to admit that I was in the flesh in that moment, Mike. I did get up out of the car, and I was going to have a conversation with that person. And praise the Lord, they drove away instead of wanting a confrontation any further. But that is the life sometimes of people that deal with unseen but very real medical conditions. Is there's kind of a social stigma and pressure of, if you don't look really, really sick, then you're not sick. And that's just not true.
Yeah, yeah, I think that adds to the aloneness. Like in our meetup this past weekend, we had someone new and who asked, like, "How do you deal with those feelings of otherness? Like, I
Mm,
don't belong in a group, or even if I can tell people about what it's like, they still don't understand. Like you probably aren't going to be fully better. You might improve, but I mean, mine's genetic and autoimmune. There's not a ton you can do about those. There's some stuff, but like our our concept of illness is either like the flu or cancer. We don't really
Mm-hmm.
have a mental space for other kinds of illnesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So often. So often. So as you have dealt with this condition, it's been progressive for you, hasn't it?
It did, yeah. So it started 5 years ago with just foot pain, and then added low back, and kept adding more parts. And I now know that that's consistent with autoimmune. Is you add more things, and now that we know what it is, we're trying some treatment. So there's definitely a path forward. But when you and I first met, I just couldn't sit or stand for an extended period of time. I think I told you at that boot camp training, like, hey, if you see me just standing in the back while you're teaching, it's not because I hate what you're saying. It's because
That's
I
what most
just can't. I just can't sit right now.
right.
Um,
Right. But then I also hit you up with a lack of grace at one point because we were doing a facilitator training and I didn't realize how your condition had really continued to get worse. And I don't think I was very graceful with you at one point. In fact, I distinctly remember coming back and apologizing to you later on because you weren't able, as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, you weren't able to wear your shoes
yes.
because of pain.
Yes.
And I was more focused on, hey, we're trying to be professional here. We got 100 people coming in the room. Mike, put your shoes on. What are you doing? And I wasn't like, I was not even tuned in at all to, dude, you were doing great just being there that day. So that was to my shame. And I know you've since forgiven me, but I'm still pretty embarrassed about that.
Yeah, and that's one that when you apologize, I'm like, I'd forgotten about that. So I had just,
Glad
it
you
did,
did.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You told me it had been on your heart for a while. What I remember from that training was how you were talking about your health stuff with caring for your wife, because the lies I was believing at the time, I'm starting to consider maybe I should propose, but am I going to be a burden to my now wife? But
Mm,
as you're talking about caring for her, not once did I sense resentment. Not once did I sense anything like that. Any of the like any of the lies I was believing. So
mm,
I needed to hear what you were saying and how you really thought about it.
mm.
And so that was my takeaway from that. I think with the shoes thing, I was just kind of like, I'll put them on for a little bit. I'll take them off as soon as everyone's in. And I also at that point I wasn't good at articulating what was going on, because sometimes it's just like, this is my life. I kind of forget that other people don't know that this is just how my life is. So and I appreciated you bringing it up, and then it was a chance to say like, hey, I'm actually really appreciated what you said later that day, and that started the idea for this podcast episode right now. Was I think there's more people who need to talk about stuff like this. So
Yeah.
let's record something from our perspectives are different. The caregiver and the patient, but there's a lot of overlap there.
There really is. There really is. And one of the most common things that, and you've already touched on this, but I want to come back to it is how can a good God allow you or call you into ministry? Does he like, why would he do that? Does he not know that this is not going to be like perfectly easy? And did he maybe get it wrong with you? Like, he got some other people he's called into, but he's really called you and your family, or in our case, Marky and our family. There is a sense of isolation. There's a sense of nobody else is going through this. And that's just not fully true at all. But boy, people feel that way. And Mike, I imagine you've had some people come to you, but as I've been open and honest about Marky and her brain surgeries and sorry, I feel a little emotional at the moment. Just some of the pain that she's gone through, as I've been honest about that with people, that first of all, it's not for show. Secondly, that has allowed many people to go, hey, wow. So I really am called into ministry. Like I thought I was, but I thought maybe God just, not that he got this one wrong, but I was wondering if I was really called into doing this. My husband has a heart condition, or my wife has this thing, or I personally have this thing. And so, yeah, it really is a topic that is worth taking the time to discuss illness and support raising. And this particular episode, Mike, yeah, let's zoom in on this idea that you are not alone in this. So I'm going to kind of kick the microphone to you here and let you kind of preach to us a little bit, my friend.
Yeah, well, so one of my fraternity brothers from college is on my support team, and he knew about a lot of the health stuff, so he sent me a multi-part sermon series on suffering from someone who's had a heart condition. And the basic message was illness and just, I'd say, suffering in general. We doubt either God's goodness or his sovereignty or both. And it's one where you can have the theology. You can know that God works all things for the good of those who love him. You can know that. You can say that. You can memorize it. But then when you're in the moment, like Job, can you actually say, the Lord gives and takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
so much harder when you're actually going through it.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, and you flew out to Focus to teach this summer for us, and we just briefly connected while I was on the couch on just seeing how there is good fruit. Like, yes, this is hard, but I can see God is working, and I really wish he didn't have to use this and he'd use some other means, but he is working in some sort of personal stuff. I very much was the perfectionist, completionist, got to get everything done. I was overly committed, overly busy, which I think a lot of people in American culture are. And I had tried to eliminate it and it didn't work. Well, illness is a great way to just cut that out. So if you ever, too much on social media, too over involved, like chronic pain, that can do it. And that's how God used it. And another fruit, I've mentioned that this chronic illness meetup, there's a couple that I'm part of. That's a mission field. I would not have had that without this, and also wouldn't really have the authority to speak into it. Like, someone who's perfectly healthy coming in and saying Jesus loves you, like, who are you? Like, what do you know about this?
Mm-hmm.
Versus like, yeah, I know what that's like. And there is
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of light in the chronic illness community generally. There's a lot of, like, not just the physical hurt, doctors not believing you, friends not believing you. There's just if you don't have an eternal perspective, like it's dark.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And sometimes family not believing you.
oh
We've
yeah,
witnessed that as well. So it really can feel very isolated. It can feel very alone for both the person that is ill as well as their family, because they have to adapt. They have to say no to things that everyone else can say yes to. They spend more money on healthcare. Like
mm-hmm.
there's just a lot more going on that makes you, it can make you feel other. It can make you feel isolated and different for
And
sure.
most people have not ever had to make the decision between, I can either cook or do dishes or do laundry today, but I can only do one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Marky, there was a time when I got after her, and I mean that, and I was trying to be gracious, but also I was a little upset with her. And really came down to, we talked about it later. It was kind of crazy conversation that most people don't have. But I was upset with her because she went grocery shopping. And she goes like, "Why? I want to go grocery shopping. That's what I would do. You should be happy for me, And I was like, "Yeah, but now I know you can't eat dinner with us, with the family. Like, we desire you to be with us. And when you went grocery shopping, and maybe you needed alone time, and that was probably for the best and things like that. But I knew the second I knew that you were at the Walmart, you weren't going to have the ability to do anything else the rest of the day. And we miss you. We want you with us." And so, yeah, we don't need to get into every little example. I'm sure we both have
Yeah.
1,000, but yeah, it is different. And so for people that are dealing with illness and raising and living off support, that just adds a whole nother lens to look at things through. And sometimes, Mike, it's good to say, oh, wait a minute, you know what? This is hard, but also there's fruit. God
Mm-hmm.
is working. There is fruit. So what have you learned about that?
Well, I mean, your example of how it impacts others, I think, is a good one because you and I are both Americans. We have a very individualistic society,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how my decisions affect my wife. So I have that perfectionistic drive. Like, especially laundry. Like, I can burn through my standing time really fast, and there's just a couple more shirts, and then my feet are out for the day. Like, I didn't consider how this will affect my wife, but also the ability to ask others for help and to receive that, I think, is a lot more biblical. There's Paul uses the image of the body of Christ so many times that we can support each other in that, and should. There's some stuff that's too much for you to bear, and being able to ask for it. And I think God lovingly slapped me upside the head in prayer last year, where so I'd been doing support raising for a while. I've prayed through the Bible studies on it. I'd very much internalized the biblical convictions that I'm asking them to go on mission with me through their support. And yet I had trouble asking my Bible study guys to put the AC units in the window. Like, I'd have zero problem asking them for $100 or $150 a month over dinner. But saying, hey, could you walk upstairs and stick this window unit in? For whatever reason, it was totally different in my mind.
Huh.
But in prayer, God was saying, no, that's actually inconsistent. That if they do this physical act of mercy for you, they are also joining you on mission, and you don't have to feel burdensome in that. And so that was just a very good moment that I needed to hear that. And yeah, it was just really good. Really, really good.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Just a brief sidebar here to our listeners. Perhaps you've wanted to recruit someone to your staff team, but aren't sure how to broach the topic of support raising without either scaring them away or shoving a full copy of the God-ass book into their hands. So wouldn't you like an 8-page booklet that might calm their fears and quickly unpack the basic how-tos from a practical and biblical perspective? We actually have a booklet like that. It's called The 5 Keys to Support Raising, and you can get these booklets in English or in Spanish at cmmpress.org. You'll receive an additional 10% discount if you use the code SRS Podcast.
So I know that you have mentioned before different ways that it changed you, like fruit in your life. Dig in on that for us a bit.
I think a big area of fruit, and I briefly touched on this a little bit, was the chronic busyness. There was someone who was telling me, whenever people visit from another country and and English isn't their first language, they might think that the correct response for "how are you" is "I'm busy," because that's just how common it is in English. And it's kind of like a badge of honor, but really it is. But
it's like a Boy Scout patch. You just got to know where to get it.
So, I mean, a missionary on campus, there's so many good things you can do, and this is about souls. And basically, I had this pressure to fill my schedule and felt guilty anytime I took a break, which is not healthy. And then once I was more in an office setting, there's some great community in the Denver area, and so most evenings are filled with something like that. There wasn't really much alone time. There wasn't much rest time, and I found myself burning out and didn't know what to do with it. Well, when you're suddenly in a lot of pain, that is going to eliminate most of those. And then when I had to be horizontal, because now sitting hurt a lot too, think of how many social activities you can do where you are laying down. It's hanging out at someone's house and you just take up the whole couch. That's all you get. So any event that's not at someone's house is gone. And this is all pre-pandemic. And so Zoom meetings are not so much a thing. There's not the accommodation. And so I'm at home most evenings because that's all I can do. And I didn't like that, but also was like, okay, Lord, you did a thing that I could not do. I could not cut this chronic busyness out, and you did it in a way that I still don't like, but you did it, and I see the great benefit that has in my life, and especially in my marriage. Like, imagine how my marriage would be if I was trying to be that overly busy. I just wouldn't be present to my wife at all. And I think this illness has really strengthened our marriage because we have to communicate through, hey, today's a higher pain day. I can't help you with dinner. Or today's a higher pain day. I know I have to cook dinner because you're getting home late. I can't do any dishes after.
Yeah. Now, obviously people a lot of times they'll jump to, they'll kind of make light of that and be like, sweet, you get to get out of dishes. But when you're in a lot of pain and when you're dealing with chronic illness, I just want to acknowledge to our listeners out there, we know you would like to be able to do the dishes. That's not a chore. That's like a pleasure. You hope to be able to do the dishes. And so Mike, I basically, I didn't want to make a joke out of that. I want people to understand a lot of people will. A lot of times, a lot of people will. And you can see the humor in it. But also at some point, it's not funny. And boy, you need grace for those moments, don't you?
Yeah, I think people, if they feel uncomfortable, can say things that they don't realize the impact. And being able to give them that grace that, hey, I don't think you realize this is what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think sometimes we can project onto others. So, like, I would imagine, oh man, I'm such a burden. My wife resents me for it. But if it was reversed, if she was the one who had pain and she said, hey, I can't do dishes tonight, can you? Gladly. I would gladly do that. Well, why would I expect her to resent me if the roles were reversed?
Yeah.
It's that inconsistency. And again, we did a podcast on renouncing lies. It is so easy to believe lies. And
Oh,
bringing
yes.
them into the open is such a great tool for that, because the devil is going to keep piling the lies on. But when you talk about it, it's easy to see, wow, that sounds really stupid when I say it out loud. And I'm glad someone else can speak into that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's good. And honestly, too, I mean, there's this whole other, I guess, fruit. Yeah, let's call it that fruit that you get the opportunity, and it's not easy, but you get the opportunity to lean on God for grace and choosing grace and how you respond and not being easily offended. Boy, do we, at least in the United States right now, it's like everybody's it seems like there's a rush for everybody to be the one who's most offended or to claim victim status more than everybody else, and instead of being full of grace and love and trying to trying to walk in that with people. But for better or worse, you get a lot of opportunities for that when you're chronically ill, or in my case, a primary caregiver of somebody who's chronically ill. So,
Yeah.
well, let's transition, Mike. You have touched on this, but let's dig in this a little bit more, because there are people that might be thinking, okay, God, I have some serious health issues here. I'm just now in remission from cancer. What if it comes back? Or, my blood pressure, like, insert very valid concern here, right? And yet, for whatever reason, they are definitely believing that God is calling them to step into this vocational ministry position, and they have to raise support. They get to raise support, but boy, it just seems like they need some extra discernment. Like, they're looking for discernment and all of that. So speak to those people if you would, Mike.
Yeah, and I think discernment, that's definitely a thing that you're going to be praying about and bringing to God. So I'm not going to tell you, yes, you are called. I can give you some general principles. And one that it very much applies is God is aware of your conditions, which is not just an illness thing. This is, in general, God is aware, God is in control, and he hasn't forgotten about it. It's not like, oh man, he's busy running the universe and then forgot that I had this. So, like, when the pandemic, when all the shutdowns were first announced, I was on, I think, a webinar. I don't know if Aaron, you were the one leading it or someone else was. But one ministry, they were telling their staff, if God called you to ministry at this time, he still knew this shutdown was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
if he called you, it's because he wants you to be a missionary, and people still need to hear the gospel now, or I'd even argue people especially need to hear the gospel at
Yeah.
this time.
Yep.
So we can apply to whatever situation you're in. And in mine, here's an example, not even of ministry. It was getting married. Again, that lie that I'm going to be a burden, that's when we had to talk through. Or, like, what would this look like if it
Right.
develops this way, if there's something else going on. I didn't want to feel like I had tricked her into marrying me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh,
I mean, you
here's
are a
where
sly guy, Mike. I mean,
yep.
woo.
And so both of us, like, we had those conversations, and so we're still, the clarity in prayer, the peace in prayer is, yes, we're called to marry each other despite all of these health things. And so we went into it eyes wide open, like, wherever my health journey goes. And like I said, we're pursuing some treatments that potentially are promising, but they also might not be. So that's kind of an analogy for this calling to your ministry. So he is placing things on your heart, placing desires on your heart, knowing what your health is.
Yeah.
And you may need to adapt. We'll go into how to adapt things in a future episode, and also be aware some things you can't do. So, like, someone who at one point worked for Focus in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. It meant most mission trips he couldn't do. because most countries don't have that access. But he could do mission trips in cities that have a much more developed infrastructure for that. But rural areas were just out. So it doesn't mean it's a free pass automatically. But my experience is most things can be adapted, and that's something to pray about. If you have specific concerns, you can talk to someone in the ministry, like, hey, I'm not sure I could do this. What does that look like on the ground, especially if you haven't done it before? I think your ministry leaders would have a better idea of that. But the general principle throughout all of this is, as you're praying, as you're seeking counsel, God is still aware. He still is in control. And maybe your conditions, your situation is a way that whoever you're ministering to, they might be able to connect to that. Like that might be an entry point into their life that otherwise wouldn't be there.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, Mike, I know our intent, at least as we're recording this, is to record another episode real soon and pick up this thread. And so we're not necessarily the plan, at least at this moment, is not to release these and do all these like right away and record them all back to back, because I think part of the idea here is illness and support raising. It's not a one-off. It's a life thing. It's it's an ongoing conversation. And so obviously I do want to have you come back on as a guest, and we'll, God willing, release more episodes on this topic. So this is not a one-off. But for what we've talked about today, and this whole idea of chronic illness and support raising, I think we discussed some great things. So any final words of wisdom to our listeners that are going to engage with what you and I talked about today?
I'd say just a reiteration of our theme that you are not alone in this, and being able to talk this through with other people is helpful, whether that's within your ministry or you find people with same conditions as you. I make the offer, if I know someone in person, they're always welcome to reach out. You are not alone. People are with you in this. The body of Christ is with you in this. And above all, God is with you in this.
Mike, thank you so much. And I know you said that you'd be willing to share your email address, so we'll kind of make that the final thing. Hey, guys, Mike is busy and he has a job to do, but if you are wanting to reach out to him specifically about this, he will try and get back with you at some point, but don't expect like an immediate response. Is that fair, Mike?
That is fair. And then the other thing is, all of my emails are voice typed. So if the reply doesn't make sense and the words don't fit together, please tell me, and I will attempt to decipher what my voice software did not. So it's a fun game that I play regularly. But my email, and this is my Focus email, it's Mike, Mike .Antonacci, ANTONACCI @focus.org. So first name, but my shortened first name, last name @focus.org. And yes, I will get back to you eventually. I don't know. It kind of depends on the day and the week, honestly, but sure. I'd like to make myself available for sure.
Well, that's very graceful of you. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.